Next up, we have Adam Schwartz from TeePublic. Let's all welcome Adam to the stage. Did you get that? That was Migos t-shirt.
Perfect.
T-shirt guys.
Thank you, Frank. We are t-shirt guys.
We're t-shirt guys. So Adam's a guy I've known for a long time. Someone I definitely look up to, learned a lot from. So I'm happy to be able to have this conversation publicly because I want to have more of these conversations with you. So tell us a little bit about what TeePublic is and how you guys got started.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. So TeePublic is an e-commerce marketplace whose mission is to empower independent artists to turn their passion into profit. The way that happens on the marketplace is independent artists upload graphic art to the platform, which they can sell across 50 different product types. They can have their own branded store. And when you, as a customer, buy something on TeePublic, we produce and fulfill everything on behalf of the artist on demand. And that allows the artist to reach global scale and distribution and really focus on what they do best, which is design.
And recently, you guys had some news. Something major happened for you guys. Want to tell us about that? Let's start at the end.
Yeah, start at the end. So recently, a couple of weeks ago, we were acquired. And thanks. Yeah. And it was fortunately it was a good outcome with a partner that we're really excited to work with, a company called Redbubble, who is our largest competitor, an Australian company who's also an e-commerce marketplace for independent artists. And I think uniquely in our case, and maybe this is a bit of a cliche, but we feel like this acquisition is actually with somebody who shares our DNA, who shares our commitment to helping independent artists, and who sees the vision that we see for the future. And we think that together we're much more likely to reach that vision. So we're excited about it.
And then now going back to the very, very start, you were working on a different company before, and that was kind of the impetus for starting TeePublic. What's that story, and how do you guys get started?
Yeah, so my co-founder on TeePublic, Josh, started Busted Tees, College Humor, and Vimeo. He sold all of those companies to IAC in 2006, and fast forward 5 years later, he invested and he was getting ready to do something else. And that's around the time we met. I was coming off a failed marketplace startup. And he was interested in buying Busted Tees back from IAC. It was a failing company at that point, but thought that there was potential, specifically potential to build it and grow it as a profitable business. So ultimately, we decided to do that deal, get Busted Tees out. We're saying, hey, we're not going to take venture. We're going to build this profitable brand. And we did that for 2 years, and it worked. We were able to double that business in that time. We sort of fixed the mistakes that had occurred under like a really large parent organization. But then it stalled out. It stopped growing, and it was pretty clear to us that the ceiling was capped. I think this is this is an inflection, Frank. Hashtag inflection. We knew at that point that unless we raised venture, this business wasn't going to go. And I think that's important to note because some businesses, some models, in some markets need venture. Like we can't be honest and sit here and say like you don't need to raise venture ever. Like you can always do this yourself. Like that business at that time needed venture. What was happening in the market, going back to talk number one, Fab.com. Was going crazy. Living Social was going crazy. This is like 2012, 2013. And all of these companies in the e-commerce marketplace are spending 80 cents on the dollar to acquire a customer. It's completely unsustainable. But nonetheless, this is the market that we're operating in. So like we have to live in this propped up, unsustainable, like ridiculous world. Like that's the deal. Philosophically, we didn't want to play that game. And so we said, what is the business that we could start that would be the antithesis to all of this, that would allow us to sort of stay true to our values and not raise venture? What would that look like? And what would the personality of that business be? And effectively, it needed to be a business where the acquisition channels were not paid. It would have to be an organic search, an organic social, unpaid machine. And ultimately, that led us down the path to ideating and coming to what TeePublic is.
And then what was the main driver of users, I guess, on the two sides of the marketplace, the artists that were coming to the platform and then the customers actually buying some of the shirts?
So we started the platform with 1,000 individually curated, invited independent artists, which took us about 6 months to get to that critical mass. And we had a fairly like Airbnb-esque approach with those people, which means we treated them like gods. We undercut the market entirely. We paid them way more than everybody else was paying independent artists. We gave them service that was completely unscalable. We gave them a quality for their art that was at the time seemingly unscalable, in that before every single print went out, we had someone, you know, from our team actually like look at it. Stuff that nobody was doing because they were bigger than us, and they couldn't. Once we did that, those 1,000 artists brought us 15 to 20,000 designs, which isn't that weird. It's like 15 to 20 designs per artist. And to put that into perspective, Busted Tees, which was by that time a 10-year-old business and like, you know, pretty good size, had like 1,500 designs. So 6 months in, we already had a 10x edge on a 10-year-old company, you know, that we happened to own. And what we noticed really quickly was the social traffic started coming because we had this really curated group of artists who had social followings, and the organic traffic started coming. Because we had concentrated around a real community that was allowing us to start capturing, you know, a specific set of organic keywords on Google, and we were able to compete against much older incumbents because we instantly had so much more content than a normal brand would be able to. And so the economics of a marketplace and a print on demand as opposed to an inventoried sort of traditional brand started working pretty much right away, and the customers started coming downstream.
And then what would you say was the defensible part of it? What made it so that those artists didn't jump to other platforms when a bunch of others popped up, saw what you guys are doing, and tried to copy in different ways?
So number one is it's free to be an artist on TeePublic, so there's no reason to take your art off of TeePublic, which means we essentially have no churn. Nobody ever leaves TeePublic. People sort of go what we call it inactive, where they're not uploading new art, but they never take their old art down, which means even if somebody comes into the market now, every month we're building and building and building, and the marketplace is growing. And so the moat is always growing, and it's never getting smaller, which is fairly unique because it's like only upside. You can make more money if you just keep your art up there, take $100 a month. The second thing was because of the tight nucleus that we began with, we were creating such an absurd experience for our community. We were so supply-side focused. We were so much more supply-side, artist-side focused than our competition or anyone who really came after, who really, I think, thought about the business as more of a traditional brand almost, where it's like we're gonna use these artists as the content generation, but we're the brand. Like, we're gonna go out and market to the customer. Whereas we were completely community focused. We said we are going to build the best community. We're gonna have the best community managers. And once we created an amazing experience for 1,000 people, we didn't say, you know, now we're going to go sort of nurture the customers. We said, no, like now we're going to figure out how we scale creating incredible experiences for our supply side users, because marketplaces are all about the supply side, not the demand side. If you get the supply side right on a marketplace, the demand side should come through. That was the thesis. And so I'd say those are the two ways we really kept the competition at bay.
And then on the community side, what were those things that you guys did? What did your community managers do to make a special experience for, you know, those sellers on the platform?
Yeah. So the main thing I would say is if you're an artist on TeePublic, there is an individual human with a name that works in our office in New York that you know. And what we spent a lot of time building instead of, we could have been building, external marketing, or we could have been building even things on the platform itself. When we were building behavioral automated marketing tools that would allow us to scale the experience of having a one-to-one relationship with a community manager. So if you hadn't uploaded in 60 days, or if your sales used to be X a month and now we're Y a month and we're starting to drop off, we began to automate all of those things, but not automate those things with a newsletter from TeePublic saying, hey, we saw these things, whatever. One-to-one message from your essentially sales coach saying, we saw this, do this, it will work. Like, trust me. And that's an email. It's not a newsletter. I mean, you can respond to that email and get on the phone with that person and start talking about how to drive more sales. And so we spent years and are still doing it today, building technology to enable us to have those sort of personal conversations at scale.
Were there any growing pains when you guys were building the company, that things you weren't expecting that ended up kind of knocking you out of nowhere?
Yeah, there were a bunch. Number one was we had like serious technical challenges as we started to scale. So I've been talking about how great it is about all this content that we have. But it's also very rare for a company to have as much content that we have, which means that it's very rare to run an e-commerce platform that has, we have almost 5 billion purchasable SKUs today on the site, and which means we have basically 5 billion unique permutations and almost that many images on the site. And we had to figure out like how to build a platform that would support all of that. Huge scaling challenge, and it was a scaling challenge that we faced very early. Usually, it would be much later in a company's life cycle that you would have those sort of challenges. The second thing was the supply side. So we built the company to our benefit on a new technology, which was this print-on-demand technology that allowed us to make everything to order. But that was a very nascent space, and like all about this. So there were times when we were at peak, like in the holidays, like now. In the early years, where there was literally not enough print-on-demand machines in the world to service us and like the other people in the space, and we had to cap demand because like nobody could print our prints, and so building out that supply chain network and sort of that whole side of it was scaling as we were was dicey, and frankly is still a thing that is. Both us, the e-commerce marketplaces in this space, and the supply side are sort of growing together, and there's like a pretty interesting push and pull. But it's like it's early days, And then the third thing I would say that was challenging is once we got pretty big, people started stealing art off the platform, and they started uploading it to Amazon. And this is the sort of thing you never think about. Like you never consider this when you're like dreaming up what your great like artist empowered company is going to be. And it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible for our artist community to see their work literally stolen and then profited on by somebody else. And we felt a real responsibility to them as the stewards of their art, and we, like I said, we put so much effort into being a real partner to them, not just a platform for them, that we had to really get in front of that. And so again, that was really what ultimately became a technical challenge to solve, which now we've done that. We're sort of over that hump, but yeah.
Are there ways that you could have scaled the company that you actively decided, this is not who we are, this is not the right path for us? Whether it's talking about operations stuff, you could have built your own production facility when you got to a point where you didn't have enough printing, because I think a lot of the attitude a lot of times is let's just go bigger, let's go bigger. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Definitely. Look, I think that the one of the differences about TeePublic is we didn't ideate on TeePublic and then decide not to raise venture. We decided not to raise venture and then came up with TeePublic as a result of what would be a good business that you don't have to raise venture for, which is which I think is probably a better way to do it. And if you're thinking about not raising venture and you're in a really early stage, I would encourage you to use that frame of thinking as opposed to like, how do I fit this business, this square peg into that round hole? We said, well, a really good non-venture business would be one where there's no cash tied in inventory, which we had with Busted Tees, and there's almost no paid acquisition. So it's like all free customer acquisition. And that's essentially what TeePublic is. It's like a perfect business not to build venture on. So that's the thing that we didn't do. And I think what the result of that was, like some of the things we could have done and like left turns that we made where maybe other businesses would have gone right, was that we were, as a result, we had constraints. And those constraints were around hiring. They were definitely around operations, both internally and production. Those constraints were around marketing, how we acquired customers. And I think that those constraints forced us to be extremely disciplined and extremely focused. And we had to figure out what really worked. The experiment of venture capital is to say, there's this new emerging market, there's this interesting idea, let's give you capital to remove the constraints so that you can figure out this idea in this market and see if it's going to go. When that goes wrong, it's because the capital, it removes the constraints to the point where you don't know what you're doing anymore. You're just deploying capital in all of these different areas, and you actually don't know what growth is real and what growth is just manufactured by that capital. Whereas the situation that we were in was that didn't exist, so anything that we were doing had to have a positive ROI and it had to be sustainable. So just like no bullshit. And I think that like ultimately led us down the truer path.
Are there things you wanted to do that you think if you had that money you could have been able to do in the business? Whether it's kind of growing it to a different size or going after different markets? Is there anything that would have changed if you made that decision?
I think in hindsight, we could have gone faster. So if we'd raised capital, now I can sit from this chair and say, well, if we'd raised capital, I would have deployed it. I could have deployed it in these areas, and we would have gotten to where we got into like a year faster, 2 years faster. We'd already be further than we are today. I think the reality is, had we done that, I don't know if I would have deployed that capital so intelligently, right? because of what I'm saying about that capital would have been tempting to deploy towards a lot of paid acquisition that would have accelerated our growth, but may not have been sustainable. So look, what became the true north for the business was like after we had those initial 1,000 customers, after I think 3 months after we had the 1,000 customers, we hit $1 million in revenue, and we figured out there was a mathematical correlation. It's like if we get this many artists, and those artists on average upload X number of designs, it will equal Y number of dollars. And so all we have to do is get to like 50,000 artists and we'll be this size company. It's going to be great. And that's like still the true north of the company. That's still true today. That's all and I really believe that companies should have something like that where it's like, we just need to do one thing well. So I could say if we had raised capital, and if all of that's true, you could have gotten to that number of artists and that quantity of art much faster, and you start owning market share. I think conversely, marketplaces and things that are community driven, where the internet is the engine, I think that there are really good parallels to nature, and that things need to grow organically. Like you can take a bunch of chemicals and like you can drop it in a field and like things might grow faster, but we're starting to learn that like long term, like that might not be the best thing for that land that you're trying to harvest. And that's how I feel about it. So I have no regrets about like growing things a little bit more slowly and responsibly.
And so the company is continuing to grow. Why even sell the business? Why not just keep it going forever and, go on a beach somewhere?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of reasons. Like one is I'm an entrepreneur. I never had the intention to start a business that I would run, for like the rest of my life. Like I really love building companies. I think the second is when we sort of stopped here and we said, like, how can we get to 5 years from today? In size of the platform and revenue, all that stuff. The challenges that we were facing were fairly large, and the calculus became fairly simple, which was, well, if we partner with who was our number one competitor, and they're like number one in the market, and we're like like number two or three. We're going to get there much faster. Like, we're going to be the market leader. We're going to be able to do all this stuff together, and we're definitely going to reach that place in 5 years, like that we want to reach if we do this together, and we're in a much better position. And then the third thing is, and I think that this was fortunate for us, is like a lot of times when you are thinking about an acquisition, it can be at the detriment of the people that you claim to be serving in the first place. In our case, we were thinking about being acquired by somebody who had the exact same mission as us, who is serving an independent artist community, albeit like we have a Venn diagram where we were serving the same community, but also a different community. So when we said, well, is this acquisition just going to be like really neat for us, and like we get to take a lot of money and go home and like screw this artist community that we spent the last 6 years building, or in fact, is this partnership the best thing for the community in the space that we work in? And I genuinely feel that the partnership between us and Redbubble is the best thing for the artist community that we serve long term, and so that's why we did it.
So, how long were you working on TeePublic? How many years?
This is year 6. 18 is year 6.
So, taking that 6 years of experience, let's say you're out as an entrepreneur now. What kind of lessons from that experience do you take and put into, starting a new company from scratch? I'm assuming some of these folks in the audience, they've thought about things, but how do you build a sustainable company in the way that you guys have, knowing what you know now?
I think the first thing is to think about, and these are the things that I'm going to apply to myself, So you can take that for what it's worth. The first thing is, if you are thinking, you can't just think about, what is a good product, what is a good idea. Is there a market for this? And then I'm going to go do that thing. You have to think about all of that stuff. And then you have to think about, and am I the best possible person on the planet to start that particular business, and why, right? Maybe not the best on the planet, but like, you have an edge, right? There's something about you that that you can start that business, and something that everybody else doesn't, which is going to allow you to exploit that product and that market. That's number one. So you have to play to your strengths. Number two is, I would say you should plan to pivot. So people always think about a pivot as sort of, we wanted to do something and then that didn't work, and so we tried something else. And it's sort of sometimes there's heroic stories of great pivots, but it's also generally thought of as like a means of last resort. Like, well, shit, we got to pivot. Go into it and say, we are going to pivot this business. Start a business that is in your market. And this is really what this was not our intention, but this is what Busted Tees became. And I'm going to do this every time I start a business, like for the rest of my life. Start a business that is in the space that you want to be in, that won't scale, that can be small, that can generate cash flow, that can be profitable, that can be a tight little lifestyle business, but in the space that you want to be in. And just build that thing for like 2 or 3 years, and learn about what all the angles are, and learn about what all the acquisition models are and what all the players are doing, and really get the lay of the land. And then say, scrap it, shut that business down, and start all over again and build a new thing, and kill the business that you built for 2 or 3 years with your next business. So when we were building TeePublic, one year into TeePublic was the same size as 10-year-old Busted Tees and starting to kill Busted Tees. It was starting to go down. And like at the time, looking back today, it's like, well, TeePublic's much bigger. But at the time, we were like, uh-oh, like we're gonna kill our golden goose here. Like we have, Busted Tees was a I don't know, $7 or $8 million business. Like we were like, this is cool. Like we have a good thing, and it was profitable. It's scary to think about losing something like that. And as T Public was growing, we internally in the organization, we like had very sort of intense conversations about what we should do. And what I always like said at that time was like, guys and girls, Apple's not sitting around like lamenting the fact that the iPhone killed the iPod. Like you just have to kill whatever business you're starting, or somebody else is going to kill it. And so I would just be intentional about that and say, I'm going to start a small thing and then I'm going to kill it. And then when I start the next thing, I'm going to be like a shark, because I'm going to know all the stuff.
Awesome. Do we have any crowd questions? You're going to have to yell it out.
That was just plain awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Frank, for recording it, because I can't wait to share it with my partner. So I have a question for you based on your initial thing. You said it took you 6 months to acquire your first 1,000 customers. How did you go about that? Was it one-on-one? Was it cold calling? I mean, how do you go about that?
So the question is, how do you go about getting your first 1,000 customers in that 6 months? Like tactically, how do you do it?
Yeah, one thing I'll say, just as you're thinking about that timeline and like if that sounds quick, in our case, our customers were artists and it was free. So we had to get 1,000 people to give us $0. And then we said, if we do that, then they'll drive customers, right? So we individually cold reached out to every single one of those people and more, obviously, in order to get that. So myself and my first employee, that's all we did for 6 months was just get those people. And I advise other companies. I talk to a lot of founders, and what I'll hear from a founder is something like, I don't have time for that. And it's like, you don't have time to do anything but that. All you have to do is like sit in a room and one at a time sign up every individual customer. Not just sign them up, but know them. Like I knew, they were in the office. Like we were having drinks with them. They were personal relationships that we developed. All 1,000 of those people were people, they're still on the platform today. They still remember that time when we built a real community. And so I would encourage you to think about like, I have to make 1,000 friends. Like I have to actually know these people.
Question first, I was on your website and you have editors picks. Thank you. You have editors picks, and I wanted to know what the strategy behind that is. And piggybacking off of the gentleman that was talking about, he was working with an urban clothing brand. Can he look at this as kind of like a strategy for himself and his team to kind of promote his brand on your platform with some type of, I don't know, like Amazon has Amazon's weekly choice, and they could be on the top of the fold with some type of investment or whatnot?
Yeah, so Editors Picks is really an extension of the community team that I've been talking about all night, which is, we're still doing the same work that we were doing in the beginning today, where we have a lot of organic artists signing up on the platform, fortunately now, but we still have a team that goes out and finds the best artists on the internet and brings them onto the site. And as they're doing that, they're trying to send signals to those artists and prospective ones that like that T Public is a home of like really sort of legitimate artists. And Editors Picks is a curated selection of that, basically. So it's really not so. I mean, I think the important maybe point about that is Editors Picks is not the best thing to do for us from a sales perspective. We could do a lot of other things on our homepage that would drive a lot more clicks and would drive a lot more revenue than Editors Picks. And we don't do them, and we do Editors Picks because it's what the supply side and the artist community wants. And that's the important thing. And the clicks and the sales will come downstream later on. As it relates to the question about building a brand and is T Public viable for that, like it totally is, and that's the idea. People build huge brands on T Public. There's no risk. You can sell on all sorts of different products. You can make it whatever you want it to be. And if you're a fashion brand and you're getting started, generally, the 2 or 3 hardest things in the beginning is is production, right? Like there's been a bunch of comments about China tonight. So it's like, just don't want to do production. Like you guys handle all that for me. And 2 is distribution. So like, how do I drive customers? Like, well, we already have all the customers on the platform. Like we have traffic on the platform that you can leverage. 3 is customer service. We do that for you too. So, you know, especially when you're a new brand and you're just starting out, I think we offer a lot of tools that sort of expedite the process and take away the pain.
I'll sign up tonight.
We have time for one more. You already asked one, but fine. She's got a lot of questions.
Yeah, okay. So it's actually two quick questions. So when you were talking about killing your business, sorry. Yeah, when you were talking about killing your business, are you talking about like an exit strategy of selling it or literally shutting it down? That's number 1. And number 2, it seems like a lot of the technological investments you're making right now is taking like the high touch aspect of your business and scaling that up and replicating it and scaling it up. So what does that look like, if you could give an example?
So when I'm talking about killing the business, it wasn't selling it or shutting it down at the time. It was just about building a better model that would cannibalize it. So we still have Busted Tees. We've owned Busted Tees through the life cycle of TeePublic, and it's slowly gotten smaller and smaller as TeePublic's gotten bigger and bigger, and that's what I'm talking about. I'm saying don't be afraid to cannibalize your business with something that's better and more scalable. I think it can be a benefit to still keep it around until it's creating like operational friction, and it's just like, get this thing out of here. We got to a point with Busted Tees where we said, well, we actually really know how to make it really easy to run one of these things. That's the whole point of TeePublic. So we sort of just used TeePublic to run Busted Tees for a long time. The second question was about creating, you know, sort of scaling high touch communications and how we're doing that. So we built we built out like a Salesforce CRM for all of the artists on the platform. Again, which is fairly unique to do when you have, hundreds of thousands of users. Generally, people who are using a CRM are SaaS companies, software companies who are using it for like, maybe a few thousand customers or something like that. But we built out profiles on Salesforce that have, all sorts of different information about how people are using the platform so that we could create data reports that would then trigger through behavioral email automation messages, email messages, text messages, or ads as those artists were moving through certain sort of tipping points in their life cycle where we knew that if they took certain actions or they did certain things, they were more or less likely to be successful. So we looked at what is the behavioral traits of the most successful artists on the platform over time, and then let's tell everybody to do those things at those points in time. Let's tell everybody else, and let's build a CRM and an email marketing tool that automates all of that.
I think that's all we got time for. Thank you so much, Adam, and thank you.
Hey everyone. Can I get your attention really quick? Really quick. I just want to shout out Frank because he is super humble. Super humble. I'm fighting with him all the time on Facebook. You need to put something up on this white site about you. He's like, nah, I'm cool. But he puts a lot of hard work in this, and everyone who volunteers or, backs him on this, they know that he's such a great guy, and he really genuinely wants to help other entrepreneurs succeed. That's actually how I met Frank. Someone was like, hey, you need to talk to this guy before you leave the country and go to that accelerator. I was like, all right. And he looked out for me the whole time to this day. So I just want to show him the love that he deserves and embarrass him right now. So if you see him, give him a hug and pat on the back. And thank you so much for doing this and sticking to it. And we appreciate you, okay?
Thank you. Ready? Everybody, move in.
I'll connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like you jumped in.
What do you say? I know. I'm sensing bias. He's like, anyone? I'm like.
Yeah, you were.
So smile, please.